When a coworker urged her to contact Linda Gottfried, a paranormal investigator, the anonymous witness, now a Greyhound bus driver, told the story of a strange and frightening encounter she had in 1966 when she was 8 years old. Although she is now 58 years old, she is still haunted by something she, one of her friends, and her younger siblings saw one summer evening 50 years ago. They unwisely decided to sneak out of their homes to play at a nearby park in Richmond, Virginia. The kids walked from their apartment building following a path that took them through a field and past a stream that went into the woods to a point where the forest came to reveal a playground. The group only had a short time playing before they suddenly heard a strange sound, which the witness described as somewhere between a ghostly moan and a horse neighing. This disturbance apparently threatened the residents of the witness's apartment building at night for some time before the incident. And although her parents always blamed it on the nearby trucking company, she thought it didn't make much sense because the trucks were at their busiest during the day, and the menacing moan she heard only in the evening and at night. Disturbed by the familiar sound, the witness turned to where it seemed to come from, only to be confronted by a creature unlike anything her young mind could imagine. It was a tall, dark figure that seemed to be watching her from about a block away. She described the creature as looking human from the top of the head to the bottom of the torso, but claimed that the rest resembled a horse similar to a centaur. It was too dark to see its face clearly, but she confirmed that there were no ears and that the head looked like it was covered in shaggy fur, and that the rest of its body had short, smooth fur. As soon as the creature saw the children, realizing that it was being watched, it ran towards the group of frightened children. The arms on its humanoid body were held in a bent position while running, with the elbows slightly pushed to the sides. Screaming, the witness grabbed her 4-year-old brother, and the whole group ran for their lives towards the tree line, being chased away the mythological menace. Even on the grass, the group could only clearly hear the heavy clatter of the horse hooves, with legs burning from adrenaline. The group managed to reach the tree line marking the edge of the park. Pausing for a moment, the witness turned to check where the creature was, noticing that it too apparently stopped about a half block away from them. Its horse parts were practically turned as the torso and head were twisted to look at her. At that point, she was able to estimate it to be about 7 to 8 feet tall. The centaur did not come any further, and the frightened children were able to run back to their homes. Of course, their parents did not believe them, but apparently the brother and friends of the witness still talked to her about it. The witness says that she does not normally believe in ghosts and that she has not had any other paranormal experiences in her life. However, she continues to insist she remembers the incident vividly, and Gottfried testified to her credibility, saying she seemed as serious and reliable as any eyewitness she had spoken to in the past. This is not the only report of a creature resembling a centaur she has received. Around 1970 in Arizona, between Sierra Vista and Benson, when 2 young men were driving down Highway 90, they were forced to stop when the engine of their car suddenly stalled. They got out to look, but were unable to find what was wrong. They sat back in the car thinking about what to do next. Of course, this was before cell phones were widespread in use. They couldn't simply call someone without walking along the highway to a town with a payphone. Their thoughts were soon interrupted when they heard the sound of a hooved animal running towards them. They turned to look out the back window and saw a half-man, half-horse creature come up and start ramming the back of the car with its front hooves. There was no mention of separate arms like a classic depiction of a centaur would have. His friends started shouting to get them out of there, and the driver's frantic attempts to restart the engine somehow worked, and they sped away. The driver told his parents when he finally got home and remembered his mother saying, "What were you doing that caused the devil to show you this demon?" A family member added that he remembers the back of the car being badly damaged all over, as if someone had hit it with rocks. Another story sent to Godfrey was from a woman who was driving her son on a mountain pass in the western United States. More recently, in the 2000s, she wrote, "This occurred at the summit of Bridge Creek in Washington. It is located in the Colville Reservation of the Arrow Lakes tribe. The elders say that in the area they saw a deer man, and if you see him, it is a sign that a person will lose their lives. I don't know anyone who has seen them, but I have heard stories. I had never heard of a deer man before. What my son and I saw was a herd of deer, and among them was a man from the neck up. He was reaching up into a tree, but it couldn't be a costume. He was ugly and had ratty black hair and a bare chest. We only saw it for a second, but it lasted long enough that we both looked at each other and asked, 'Did you just see what I saw?' I had to lift a bunch of shit to stack. Oh, holy shit. The Dragon of Fayette County is the name given to a cryptid seen in Pennsylvania. Fayette County is located near the southern tip of the western side of the state and borders both West Virginia and Maryland. The sighting occurred on March 28, 2012, when an unnamed man was letting his dog out close to midnight. He went to the darker end of his yard to give his dog presumably a more private place to do his business. As they walked further from the comfort of the light of their house, the foliage outside was especially thick, creating a sense of isolation that can be all-encompassing. In the wooded parts of Pennsylvania, standing in the cool night, the man continued to listen to the silence of the forest, enjoying the peace. However, that soon ended when he began to hear the flapping of wings. His attention was drawn to the sky. The figure wasn't lit, but he could tell that it was flying about 50 feet above the ground. The creature continued to flap its wings as it crossed the yard and went to the front of the house, catching the automatic light from the motion sensor. At that moment, he got a clear look at the creature he could only describe as a dragon. He clarified the creature was about 22 feet long and had a wingspan of about 18 feet. Its body was scaleless, but seemed to have a bright, reflective, almost glowing body. It was dark in color, close to auburn. It had 3 to 4 clawed fingers. The creature's arms, which were attached to the wings, were muscular. Its wings were extremely thick and not like bats or what is seen in depictions of dragons. At the back of its body were 2 hind fins above the legs. The creature had a long tail with a sharp tip. It had 2 horns on its head and spikes under its chin. Its head was surrounded by a cone shape. The strangest feature of this already extremely perplexing animal was its eyes and mouth glowed bright orange. Based on the man's account, it sounds like he got a close look at what he described as a dragon for long enough to observe details of its body. The creature continued to fly off into the distance, disappearing into the darkness of the night. The man said he saw the creature for only 20 seconds, which does not seem like long enough to notice details, though his encounter with the creature did not end there. Despite the creature no longer being visible, the man heard the animal call out after it had flown out of sight. It released a harsh, throaty sound that the man could only compare to a foghorn. At least to this day, no one else has officially claimed to see the creature, making this the only count of the Fayette County dragon. Oxford Treeman is a humanoid tree creature spotted in Oxford, Connecticut. A resident observed a 4-foot-tall tree with human legs run across his driveway in front of him. He didn't know what it was, but he heard a scream from the forest. On August 3rd, 2022, at about 10:45 p.m., I witnessed a bizarre creature run across my driveway. I own 14 acres of woodland, and I am also surrounded by forests just outside of Oxford, Connecticut. I was driving down my driveway when a bipedal creature about 4 feet tall and about as wide as my thigh ran out of the woods to my left, across my driveway, and into the woods and the yard of the property on the right. It was about 10 yards away from me, so I got a good look at it. It looked like a tree on legs with small arms, no visible curves, hips, or shoulders, just straight. It was brown, skinny with no fur or hair, lightning fast, as light as a feather. Almost looked like it wasn't even touching the ground. I didn't hear a sound from it running, and all the birds and other animals were dead silent. When it ran, it didn't prance like most animals or run like a human. Its legs were moving as if you were pedaling a bicycle. I saw the back of it and a bit of the right side of it. I didn't see the front or a face. I didn't see a tail, ears, or any other body parts a normal animal or human would have. About 2 months before this, I was outside around 10 p.m. and there were 2 owls hooting back and forth. I then heard this god-awful screeching sound, which wasn't a Fisher cat or a screech owl. I have no idea if that was related to this or not. I don't consume substances and wasn't drinking. I am not on any medication or anything like that. I don't know if it was for sure an alien, but I don't know what else it could be. I did not see any craft or anything, although I wasn't going to walk through the woods to look either. The Southern Kentucky horse walker was a semi-humanoid creature that was allegedly seen by an anonymous young woman known only as M.M. The incident, which was first reported on the Phantom and Monsters website on September 14th, 2020, is believed to have occurred at the witness's family farm in southern Kentucky around 5:30 p.m. The witness's parents were out of town at a horse show, and she was on her way to the stables to find the rest of the horses when she saw a humanoid figure standing in a nearby field that seemed to be watching her. House frightened, she retreated back into the barn and began to look at it through the crack in the wall. Finally, the creature retreated to the tree line. M.M. described the creature as a bipedal creature with a thin, lanky body, perhaps due to the distance from which she allegedly saw the creature. She was unable to determine the approximate size, but it appeared to have pale, hairless skin, a horse-like head with no visible facial features, animalistic legs, and no arms. As it retreated into the wood, she described its gait as unnatural. M.M. had no idea what the entity could be. If her description of the creature was accurate and not just the product of stints and an overactive imagination, the creature was certainly not a species of animal that we know of today. Of course, it is possible that what was seen was simply a frontal view of a horse or deer, potentially one suffering from mange, which explains the hairless skin. Another possible candidate would be a sandhill crane, which would explain the thin body and bowed legs. Her encounter reads, this happened in September 2014. We live on a huge horse farm in southern Kentucky. My mother, the horse fanatic in the family, travels all over the country, taking horses to shows and competitions. During that time, I usually get stuck at home with the responsibility of feeding the animals and other non-show horses. My parents were at a long weekend show that particular day. It was around 5:30 p.m. and I was on my way down to the barn to give the horses their evening meal. Our horses are arranged into multiple sections, pregnant mares in one, show horses in another, etc. I was almost done feeding and only had the southwest corner section to go when I looked into the field that lined that section that we let horses graze in the spring, and saw something that I can't really explain with words. It was far enough away that I couldn't make out facial features, but I could tell it wasn't human. It was standing upright on two legs that seemed to be backwards. Instead of the knees going forward, they bent the opposite way. The closest thing I could describe to it would be a very thin, hairless horse standing on two legs. I didn't notice any arms, but with how far away it is, I'm assuming they could have just been so close to the body and that I didn't see them. It scared the hell out of me, but I didn't think it saw me. It looked like it was watching my house, which was about 100 yards to the northwest of there. I kind of just stood there. I didn't really know what to do, so I slowly started backing up until I was back into the barn. There's a small part in the barn where there are a couple missing boards that you can easily see out of, so I stood there watching it for a while. I didn't want to try to get back home because I was worried it would see me, so I just waited. I waited for what felt like forever before this thing turned around and walked away into the woods. The way it walked was the scariest thing about it. It was so unnatural. I waited a little bit, then ran back to the house as quickly as I could. The next morning, my parents got home, so I didn't have to feed the horses again after that. I've never told anyone about this either. I did some research, but didn't find anything that compared to it. I've never seen it again after that, nor has anyone in my family ever mentioned seeing anything like it. Pocono Wildman is the Bigfoot of the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania. On a sunny afternoon, sometime in July 1970, a pair of teen sisters were driving on the back roads of the Pocono Mountains when they spotted a terrifying two-legged monster that would stay in their memories for the rest of their lives. This story was sent to American Monsters in 2015 by one of the sisters, now a grandmother from upstate New York, who asked to be identified as Anna B. She admitted her story of her encounter with the strange animal in the Pocono Mountains as a very rough draft, although almost half a century had passed since the incident was still fresh in her mind, and lingering fears kept her away from the forest still to this day. The story begins in July 1971. Annette, 13 years old, spent her third summer as an employee of the Bill Walker Motor Lodge in Blakely, Pennsylvania. The woman and her visiting sister, 16-year-old Christine, had just dropped Annette's co-worker off and were returning to the lodge. According to Annette, the sisters enjoyed being allowed to drive in Bill Walker's Porsche. It was fun driving through the thickly wooded area with the windows down and the radio on. It was then that they encountered this creature. In Annette's own words, I was driving about 35 miles per hour, and as the road curved, I saw this thing walking in the tall grass right in front of the tree line on the opposite side of the road. I instantly slowed down to get a better look, and my sister said, "Oh my God, what is that?" And Nat said the creature had kind of a flat head like Frankenstein and big eyes. The nose was small, almost non-existent, like two slits. It had protruding ears and full lips. Its mouth was open, but I didn't see any teeth. Annette would go on to describe a creature that stood between 6 and 7 feet tall, with a broad chest, a long neck, and a coat of dingy off-white fur that covered its body and most of its face. She was unsure whether or not the traces of brown on its fur were part of the pigmentation or simply dirt matted into it. Its eyes were dark and spaced far apart. Its hair covered the lower half of its face. There was pinkish skin around the eyes and forehead. It looked like its hair was a little longer on its head and hanging over its forehead like bangs. Annette stated that the creature was standing in the grass, which she estimated as being about 3 feet tall, rendering its lower extremities invisible, but she noticed that its arms were inordinately long and hung down at its sides. Its hands weren't visible. As the porch came to a stop on the gravel road, Annette claimed to have locked eyes with the beast. The moment her eyes met it, she was suddenly overcome by a nauseating terror. She quickly rolled her window up, and that was when Christine, justifiably overwhelmed by the whole ordeal, started to scream for her sister to drive away. Annette looked away from the man, things hauntingly dark eyes, wisely complying with her sister's panicked request. According to Annette, I hit the gas. I was scared. I wanted to get out of there. There was a feeling if we stayed there, that thing might attack us. I don't know why. It was just a gut reaction. As she drove away, Annette glanced into the rearview mirror, terrified that this thing might actually start to pursue her and her nearly hysterical sister. The wild man had not moved, only turning its head to watch them leave. A few miles down the road, just as the two petrified siblings were starting to regain their composure, when the brand new porch suddenly stopped working in the middle of the road. Being the older sister, Annette tried her best to remain calm in this terrifying situation to avoid further freaking out Christine, but was horrified that the creature might be lurking in the woods just a few feet away from the car. Soon another person passed by and helped the sisters. Finding out the car's oil was neglected to be changed, they were relieved and thanked their helper, making it back to the motor lodge without incident. On the way there, they decided, out of fear of ridicule, to keep their sighting to themselves. When asked if she thought she might have seen Bigfoot, Annette shook her head, saying, I don't think so. It may have been part human, part caveman. That's the only thing I can think to compare it to. It was definitely not a person or a bear. To this day, I have no idea what it might have been. Mason believes he encountered a shape-shifting reptilian hybrid while attending college in Oregon. One night, he had a terrifying confrontation with a deadly monster in his bedroom. After deciding to invoke the human side of the creature due to its manipulative behavior towards his friends. If this report is to be believed, apparently reptilians walk among us in our daily lives. Mason learned to fear the presence of a certain deceitful and manipulative classmate. He described this person as dangerous. Mason confronted the person, calling him a cold-blooded bastard when he humiliated one of his friends. The bully then turned to him, looking at him in full rage and declaring that he would suffer because of his disrespect. Things only went downhill from there. Later that day, Mason was studying in his dorm. He was concentrating on his work when he became aware of the beginning of the supernatural attack that would come that night. Apparently, a hazy, shadowy figure began to appear in the room, startling him and causing him to raise the vibration of the room using the energy sensitivity he claims to have. Shadow person quickly dissipated after that, but Mason was now on high alert. He fell into somewhat of a disturbed sleep after that, only to be awakened by what he thought was a nightmare. It was 2 a.m, and there were scaly hands around his throat. A grotesque reptilian creature sat on his bedridden body and tried to suffocate him. It screamed and moaned in a terrible way, as if it rejoiced greatly In his panic and agony, thrashing against the creature, Mason threw the creature off of him and crouched down onto the floor and looked at him, letting him suddenly realize that it was the hostile classmate he argued with earlier in the day. The monster lunged at him suddenly, and Mason ran across the room to his desk, where he had left a pocket knife in his pants pocket. The creature choked him again as he grabbed the weapon from his pocket and tried to flip open the blade. He managed to push the creature away from him just long enough to slice it across his left arm and chest. Screaming with inhuman fury, the reptilian monster attacked the wall near the room, where it seemed to disappear like a ghost. Exhausted, Mason turned on the light of the room. There was red splatter on his knife sheets and floor. Fearing the worst, he checked that he hadn't been cut during the fight to make sure it couldn't be his own. He didn't sleep the rest of the night, alert and ready to strike if anything else attacked him. And extremely tired, Mason was on his way to class the next morning when he noticed the hostile individual he had fought the previous day and apparently that night emerging from his dorm room. He had a bandage on his left arm where Mason had injured the reptilian. Noticing Mason, he quickly approached him until the pair were literally nose to nose. He looked at him with evil reptilian eyes and muttered a warning. "Watch your back because it's not over yet." Mason, petrified, walked past him and went to class. He was later told that the nursing staff and property managers wanted to speak with him. When he spoke to one of the employees about a manipulative character with whom he had apparently shared a dorm house, the receptionist emphasized that it was important for him not to provoke this person or cause problems. Mason was amazed. It was obvious to him that the staff were afraid of the reptilian students because they acted like his minions. That night, Mason felt a dark presence watching him, and that vague sense of dread lingered for weeks until he was evidently forced to leave campus to escape the reptilian menace. Even that doesn't seem to have removed his oppressive influence. As Mason says, he still often sees the reptile and his friends staring at him whenever he's on campus or in town. He knows he wasn't the only person who was affected in this way by this evil person. But it was also clear that no one dared to speak about it. 2 students later passed away suddenly in the same dorm room where Mason was attacked, and no information has been released about their passings except they were apparently of medical causes. Mason ends his account with a warning to readers that these shapeshifters are a burden to cause human suffering to continue to plague humanity. Apparently, he has since learned better ways to protect himself from entities and advises anyone who learns of his account to stay protected. A father and son from the Sears family of Chicago were moose hunting in central Ontario. They were led by a local named Jack. He had a reputation as a reliable guide, and so it was clearly foolish for the Sears family to choose to ignore his warnings of a big animal in the area. This senseless decision would cost the young Sears boy his life. Jack had guided wealthy tourists and politicians from across Canada and the United States. His career is said to have been uneventful until one day in 1894. It was October, prime moose season. The hunters and their guide walked along the Mattawa River into Quebec. The group saw many moose, but the Sears men would only settle for a real trophy, so they pushed Jack to take them deeper into the wilderness of the area. Jack hesitated, but finally agreed to take them to a lake, but insisted that he only allow them to stay in the area during daylight hours and leave before midday. As he heard of a large and dangerous creature in the area, the seers thought this was simply superstition and ignored Jack's warnings. When they reached the lake, Jack clearly told the seers' men to stay on the south side of the lake, sending the father into the thicket overlooking the clearing, while his son was told to canoe east along the lake and hunt. Both men promised Jack that they would not cross the lake, which was quite narrow where they were. Despite all these preparations, Jack was still quite nervous and spent a lot of his time walking between the two men to make sure they stayed in their assigned places. Jack told the men that they soon would be preparing to leave, but promised to bring them back early next morning. They were about to leave the area when Mr. Sears suddenly pointed to the lake. Jack's heart sank when he saw the Sears boy paddling across the lake very close to landing on the other side. Jack ran towards him, screaming desperately and waving his arms frantically, trying to get his attention. However, the young man simply did not hear him or chose to ignore him. At this point, Mr. Sears noticed a large figure moving along the tree line on the opposite side of the lake. Mr. Sears thought it was a moose and called to Jack, who was getting into his own canoe. However, Jack, still panicked, demanded that Mr. Sears be quiet. Jack jumped into his canoe, paddling as fast as he could to try to catch the Sears boy before he made a fatal mistake. The young man had already reached land and pulled his canoe to shore. Jack tried one last time to get his attention, but failed as the young man took off into the woods, ignoring Jack's desperate pleas. He continued to make frantic progress across the lake, but did not reach the shore until he heard several shots from Sears' rifle. Before silence, fearing the worst, Jack landed his canoe when the boy ran out of the woods as if he were being chased. With no time to land the canoe, Jack immediately raised his weapon to fire at the unseen monster that was chasing Sears when a giant furry animal came out of the trees running after the frightened boy. As Jack watched helplessly, the monster reached Sears in a short few steps and grabbed him by the upper body from behind. The creature then twisted Sears' head, instantly taking his life. Jack fired his weapon at the monster until it was completely unloaded, but it seemed unbothered. Instead of falling to the ground, the creature grabbed the boy by one of his legs and dragged him into the woods, holding his head in its other hand. With no more ammunition to fight the creature, Jack returned to Mr. Sears. Mr. Sears wanted to avenge his son and insisted that he follow the creature after being forced to watch the entire traumatic event. Though Jack knew that nothing good would come of this reckless decision and almost had to drag the shocked man out of the area. When Sears and Jack reached their camp, Jack insisted that they pack up their camp to go to the nearest settlement for help. The next morning, they came to an agreement to retrieve the boy's remains and immediately reported the incident to the local sheriff, who organized a group to find the monster and retrieve the boy's remains. The group included Jack, Mr. Sears, and several local loggers and lumberjacks. They searched for several days, but found only the broken weapon of the Sears boy and a short trail of red fluid. At the site, they were said to have heard monster screams and howls while patrolling the wilderness at night. Eventually, the search was abandoned, and they became increasingly fearful as the monstrous sound seemed to approach their campsite every night. Jack, his reputation now completely ruined, moved to the Huntsville region. He earned his living by hunting and trapping. Living on the outskirts of town, he became an alcoholic and drank away all his money. On rare occasions, he had something to spend. It is not known what ultimately became of Mr. Sears. The story comes from Howard B. LeBlanc, a hunter and trapper, who was told the story by his father, a French-Canadian fur hunter. His father must have heard it when he was young, working in Huntsville. Howard later told his father's story to a Bigfoot researcher who published it on the Sasquatch Chronicles website. The story is old and impossible to confirm, but may have been based on fact. Hello. Hello. Hi. See, we have a taker. You don't want it? That's my hand, ma'am. My hand. My hand. That's all. Hello. Hello. There. Took you long enough. I want it. Maybe your friends will eat it. No? Made a mess. That one's been licking me. No, don't eat my hair, please. Oh. I wish I had something better to give him. Oh. You want scratches? Oh! You want kisses? There you go. There you go, sweet baby girl. Oh, oh. This one likes me. Here comes another. Oh, 10%. Other ladies are uninterested. Of cows so much. course I wear flip-flops on a farm. Two baby cows. Should go back to filming now. They don't like the husks I brought them. I'm sure they probably prefer strawberries or something, but that's what I had. Anyway. Probably got enough footage of cows and can go back to filming. Thank you for visiting me, ladies. Thank you. Thank you.